Here we are recording again. Still in the process of landing. I've just recorded our goo measurements so that we're getting that science from those. Jebediah is handling this all very well. Now, at 15,000, I'm going to be deploying our parachute to start slowing us down from our initial re-entry here. We got up out of our atmosphere and are now heading back into it. Much like the early flights, they didn't stay in orbit for very long. I delayed that a little longer than I should have, but 10,000 is more than enough, time to slow everything down to a nice leisurely crawl. Now, once we land on the surface here, one of the things we'll be able to do is get out and take a surface sample. But we're on the water, you say. You can grab a handful of water, and it counts for science. Surface samples from the surface of Kerbin at this time, you can get them pretty much anywhere. So, you're going to have more than enough water landings in the future. But most of those you're going to be busy trying to make sure that it actually lands in one piece. This is one of the best times to get your water surface sample and your other science when a lot of your early crafts, this is where they're going to be ending up with all of your science equipment anyway. So you may as well take the time every now and again to pick up an extra bit of science by doing your splashdown science. Nope, I just hit the 500 meter mark for our parachute, which has reduced our speed to 7.4 meters a second. Remember what I was saying before, where it will slow it down below the 10 meters a second you need to land and survive, but it's a little overloaded. Normally you'd be traveling about 5.4 with just the pod and the parachute. These two science modules slow that speed down by a good bit, but I'd prefer to be a little slower. Later on, when I have more science equipment, I'll have the science materials bay underneath this, as well as the other science equipment studded around it. I will, by that point, need the other parachute, because without it, you won't be landing intact with just the single parachute.
Bye-bye rocket.
Bye-bye rocket, yes, Lisa. So, this should land safely in a few meters. And as we're doing that, I'll take the IVA view and show you something important. That, right there, that gauge, radar altitude. It's very important for when you're doing descents on the dark side of the moon or the dark side of Kerbin when you don't necessarily know how far above the actual ground you are, since your altitude meter shows you your height from sea level. If you're landing anywhere other than adjacent to the ocean level or the average height of your target planet, you're going to need to pay attention to your radar altitude so that you can know how far above the actual ground you are. This is very important for Apollo-style landings where you're landing with landing legs trying to land precisely on the surface without parachutes. So landing on the moon or other gravity or gravity-less or low-gravity bodies, you're going to need to know exactly how far above the ground you are. Now, you can do that with lights, your shadow. If you have a system capable of running at a good enough quality, you can run it with the shadows set to on so that you can see where your shadow pops up in the terrain, so that you can use that to help you gauge how high above the ground you are. Now, using things like your altitude and your radar altitude will give you a better, more accurate picture of how close you are to actually landing the craft. Landing on other bodies is extremely difficult and something that will be explained more as I do those things. But for now, all we need to know is that we have landed safely in the waters of Kerbin. So we'll go ahead and get out here. Hey, Jeb, what you doing out there on the surface of the water? We'll get an EVA report from flying over Kerbin's water. Pretty interesting, isn't it? The craft counts as still flying when they're clinging onto it like that, which is very handy for getting more of your EVA reports in one go. So we'll go ahead and keep the data, reboard. That will store his EVA report in the pod. Now when we get out again, See how he stood up? That happens from time to time with your water landings, where the craft won't necessarily be able to support his weight. And we get a new EVA report from in Kerbin's water. We keep the data for another 3 science, and we take a surface sample for a whopping 12 science. Early game, this can help quite a bit, as obtaining science with the early game mechanics can be sometimes challenging for other new players, and especially me. And you may require a little bit of acrobatics to get back into a water landing pod, but that's fairly normal. Anyway, this is Mr. Calzone signing off. I'll see you all tomorrow, or another day, depending on when you watch these videos. Good luck and goodbye. Why aren't you working?